Hey everybody, this is Zelaros. Today I want to have another review of some of the new cards coming out in the next Hearthstone expansion, Mean Streets of Gadgetzan. Today I want to go over mostly the Paladin cards that have been released so far, and some of the neutrals. I'm going to focus on the other classes in later review videos, so let's get right into it. First card I want to go over today is Getaway Kodo. 1 mana Paladin Secret. When a friendly minion dies, return it to your hand. Now this resembles Redemption, the other Paladin Secret, but instead of just returning it to life, it returns it to your hand. This lets you use battle cries more. It gets you more additional value out of the battle cry, but sometimes you'd rather just have the redemption effect active. I feel like the card is worse than redemption in the idea that it does you have to play the body again for the full mana cost. It doesn't just put it back on the board. And I'm not too sure about this, but it's unclear whether if it dies, the death rattle still goes off. If it's sent immediately back to your hand without the death rattle, then this card would be significantly worse than Redemption. Even though it has the extra Battle Cry synergy, you have to pay the full mana cost, and it might not even have death rattle effects. That really makes it a pretty poor card, and Paladin Secret's already pretty poor as it is. So I feel like after a little bit of testing, this card isn't going to see very much play at all. In Arena, though, it might have some good value in Arena. Being able to simply play a minion again for tempo is pretty important, but on average, probably a very poor card. Next on the list is Smuggler's Run. 1 mana spell, give all minions in your hand +1/+1. Now, we're not entirely sure how the mechanic of giving minions in your hand more stats is really going to play out. We're going to have to wait to the expansion to see exactly how powerful it is. But as of right now, this card seems incredibly powerful. Being able to buff your entire hand of minions on turn 1 to follow it up with more buffed cards could really spiral out of control in a more aggressive or tempo oriented paladin deck. Now, a card like this is obviously going to want to run heavy minions compared to more spells or more of a balanced deck archetype, but it has the potential to be a very good card. I think in Arena, this card's going to do pretty decent. Being you might forego putting something out on turn 1, but buffing up all of your other turns could be pretty powerful and could spiral out of control pretty quick. I think this card has potential to see some decent play. The next card I want to review is Grimscale Chum. A 1 mana 2/1 Murloc. Battlecry. Give a random Murloc in your hand +1/+1. Now, it's unclear as of yet whether or not the mechanic of giving random cards in your hand more stats is going to be worth it. But I think we could tell right off the bat that this card will not see play whatsoever. Yeah, it'll probably be put into a Murloc Paladin deck, but the Murloc archetype is not strong enough in the meta to see play competitively. So by default, this card isn't going to see play at all. It's a decent card for a Murloc deck, but Murlocs as a tribe just aren't strong enough for this to see competitive play. I think it's an okay card in Arena, though. It's a 1 mana 2/1. It gives you something to play in turn 1. If you have another Murloc, that's great, but it's a solid Arena card, but for Constructed, it's not going to see any play whatsoever. Next is Grime Street Outfitter. 2 mana, 1/1. Give all minions in your hand +1/+1 on the battle cry. Now this is very similar to Smuggler's Run that I just reviewed. It does the same effect. It gives all minions in your hand +1/+1, but this has a body attached. I feel that this card is slightly better than Smuggler's Run, simply because you do get the body effect from it. You can technically fight for the board, but again, we're not entirely sure exactly how this effect is going to play out. It seems very, very powerful. You're going to want to play this in a heavy minion deck to get as much value out of it as possible. But it's on the fence, really. It could go either way. Usually, you probably don't want to play a 1/1 on turn 2. You want to play something bigger. It's kind of the equivalent of hero powering, but the value later on that you'll really make back the tempo loss of just playing a 1/1 on turn 2. So it has the potential to just immediately swing the game in your favor, especially in a more aggressive style deck. Same thing as Smuggler's Run. In Arena, you forego the tempo, but you really get a massive tempo gain later on if you have more minions in your hand and spells. So it could see some decent play in Arena, but overall, I'm excited to try this card. Seems very interesting. I think it's going to be pretty good. Next, I'll go over Small Time Recruits. 3 mana spell, draw 3 1-cost minions from your deck. Now, this card is a lot like Divine Favor, where it immediately draws you cards on the 3 mana slot, but it's different in the idea that you can force the draws out. You're not reliant on your opponent for how many cards you draw. You're always going to draw 3 cards, and you always know what you're going to draw. You can very much manipulate this, and it's got the added benefit of thinning out your deck, so you might get more reliable draws later on. Now, as a standalone card, I think this card is very powerful. I think it would see play over Divine Favor in an aggressive style deck, while Divine Favor might be more beneficial in a mid-range style deck. But this also has a lot of potential with other cards that we've seen so far, like the Grime Street Outfitter or Smuggler's Run. You can completely fill up your hand with a bunch of 1-cost minions and then immediately buff all of them to much more powerful levels, which makes it so even though you're only paying 1 mana, you're getting extremely high value out of those 1 mana cards. The potential right there is pretty massive. That is going to be a very powerful card in the right deck, and it's going to be incredibly interesting to see how this card plays out in the meta. I think this card is very good, though. Arena, not so much. You usually don't even have 1-drop sometimes, so it's not really going to see much play there. But in Constructed, it's got a lot of potential, can be very powerful. Next is the Paladin Legendary, Wicker Flame Burn Bristle. 3 mana, 2/2, Divine Shield, Taunt. Damage dealt by this minion also heals your hero. Now, I absolutely love this card. I think it's absolutely amazing. The Divine Shield and Taunt is incredibly helpful, as we've seen on Tyrion. Even though the stats are slightly below what you'd want for a 3 mana card, it takes multiple hits to take this guy down. And if you're being attacked by minions, that also heals you back. I think this card is an example of something perfect for anti-aggro decks. Really helps you clean out the early game, but if you do also have buffs, this card can spiral out of control like crazy. Just hitting this minion the next turn with Blessing of Kings lets you heal for 6 damage back, which is incredibly powerful against an aggro deck or a much more Zooey style deck, and they still have to attack this minion to get back at chipping away at your health. This card is absolutely amazing. I think this is an amazing card. We need more cards like this one in the game. Low cost minions with crazy good effects. Super awesome. I can't wait to play with this card. In Arena, this card is going to be one of the craziest legendaries to put down on turn 3. It's going to be amazing. Now we have Grime Street Protector. 7 mana 6/6 Taunt. Battlecry, give adjacent minions Divine Shield. Now this card is incredibly powerful. It's a big minion, and it gives other minions Divine Shield. However, the fact that you have to wait so long into the game makes this card a little bit iffy. You might not reliably have a good card to give Divine Shield on turn 7. However, if you manage to give anything Divine Shield on turn 7, this card is huge. It's massive tempo swing in your favor. It lets you trade favorably. It's a giant wall with Taunt, so the minions that just got Divine Shield can even be protected further. So this card is really, really good if it can get those Divine Shields off. By itself, if it can't get the Battle Cry, it's a 6/6 taunt for 7 mana, which is okay, but at this point, you're already going to be playing Tyrion the following turn on turn 8. You don't really need another 6/6 taunt that doesn't really get you anything. But if it can get the Battle Cry off, it's going to be a very powerful card. The only question is how reliably we'll be able to put that Battle Cry on minions. In Arena, I think this card is incredible, regardless of whether you get the Battle Cry off. 7 mana 6/6 taunt is just good in Arena. It just gives you a minion to play. Overall, decent card. In Constructed, it's got massive potential. We'll see. Now, the last Paladin card is Grime Street Enforcer. 5 mana 4/4. At the end of your turn, give all minions in your hand +1/+1. Now, this card is incredibly powerful. It's slightly understated for a 5 mana card, but it immediately gives you the effect of getting +1/+1 on all the minions in your hand. With the added bonus that if this card survives, it's going to continuously buff up cards. That makes this card extremely dangerous. Just like in Emperor Thaurissan, this card will most likely be an insta-kill card, where you want to remove this from play the second it comes down. But you're still going to get value out of it even if it's removed. That, at the 5 mana slot, that's going to make this card very strange. Unlike the previous Paladin cards, where you could use it early on to make sure you get buffs later in the game, this card is probably going to be used in a more mid-range style format to buff up later minions, like big minions, like dragon synergies maybe. It's going to be a very powerful card. I don't think it'll see that much play in these style decks because you're going to have to use it later on, and the fact that it's going to be so easily killed off. But when it does work, it's going to be absolutely crazy. So I think overall it's going to see some play in Constructed, but not be too crazy out of control. For Arena, though, this card is absolutely insane. If you drop this on turn 5, that's just going to mean havoc for your opponent. They need to absolutely remove that, or this card will absolutely just instantly win you the game on turn 5. Overall, decent card. Next, I'll go over some neutral cards. I have the Worgen Greaser, 4 mana 6/3. Nothing special, just a basic card. Not going to see any constructed play, as with all of the plain text cards. It's probably not even that great of an arena card. It's very overstated on the attack. It dies to everything. It's going to trade up very well, but it's just not that great of a card. Not really going to see too much of it. Nothing to say here. We also have Hired Gun, 3 mana 4/3 taunt. Now, this card's not going to see any constructed play whatsoever. It doesn't do anything. But I do like the card. It's kind of interesting. It's a higher attack taunt compared to normally having really low attack and high health. This lets it trade up to bigger minions. But again, I don't see it seeing any play. Doesn't really do much. Taunt's very weird in Hearthstone. It doesn't really get much value, especially on taunt cards like this. It's just going to die to something like a Frostbolt, and it's not really going to help you counter anything aggressive. Not really going to see any play. It's a turn 3, 4/3 in Arena, so it's an okay card in Arena, but again, nothing special here. Not much to say. We also have Grookfu Master. Got a little monkey here. It's pretty cool. 5 mana 3/5. Wind Fury. Now, Wind Fury is very notorious for not being very good. Most Wind Fury cards are just very weak cards, including this one. This card is not going to see any constructed play whatsoever. I feel like the Wind Fury mechanic has a lot of potential in Hearthstone if they just expanded upon it a little bit. But in its current state, it's not going anywhere. This card's not going to do much. Arena, it's probably pretty bad too. Not really going to do much there. Again, nothing much to say. It's a pretty bad card. Next up is Wind Up Burglebot. 6 mana, 5/5, mech. Whenever this attacks a minion and survives, draw a card. Now this card is quite underpowered 5/5 for 6 already is very low stats for the 6 mana part. The mech tag in the standard format really doesn't mean anything anymore. There's not enough mechs to go around, and the effect is quite poor. When you attack a minion and it survives, you'll get a card, but you really might as well get a card off a Battle Cry or a Death Rattle instead. It really is no guarantee it will survive, especially at the 6 mana point. A lot of the other things it's going to be trading into are around 5 attack or higher. So it's going to want to trade down just to get an even small value out of it, which is really not what you're looking for at a 6 mana point. Especially in Arena. This card is pretty awful in Arena. This really isn't going to see any play whatsoever. It's actually probably a nerf to Gorilla Bot if you think about it. It's not worth playing whatsoever. It's a pretty bad card. Next is Second Rate Bruiser. 5 mana 4/4 taunt, costs 2 less if your opponent has at least 3 minions. Now this is a card that I think we need a lot more of in Hearthstone. It's by itself an card. It doesn't There's way better taunt cards out there for 5 mana. It's not really that effective at what it does. However, once 3 minions come into play, it becomes a 3 mana 4/5, which is incredibly important. That's an overstated minion for 3 mana, which is exactly what we need. We need more cards like this that fit a niche role, per se. That this is clearly an anti-aggro card. It's perfect for stopping aggression. But if it isn't aggression, you're going to have to pay a little bit more for not so great stats. So that's more of the drawback of putting this in your deck. That you want to counter aggressive decks, but if it's not an aggressive deck, well, you're going to be at a little bit more of a disadvantage for having this in your deck. But that I feel like we need much more of in Hearthstone because we have so linear cards. It's either aggro or it's hardcore control. This card is perfect for fitting a certain role. It fights aggressive decks, but it doesn't necessarily go well with other decks. It's very niche and it does its role properly. In Arena, I don't necessarily see it doing too well. Paying 5 mana for a 4/5 is not really what you're looking for on turn 5. But, I mean, if they have 3 or more minions, it can be a good card. That's not necessarily going to happen on turn 5, especially when you're trading for tempo on the board. Arena, not so good. I think this card is great for Constructed. This card might be a little bit under the radar right now, but I think it's going to be a pretty good card. Now last but not least, we have Doppelgangster, a 5 mana 2/2 Battlecry. Summon 2 copies of this minion. Now when I first saw this minion, I was a bit underwhelmed. I thought getting 2 copies of a 2/2 on 5 mana, it's okay. You're getting 6/6 worth of stats, which isn't bad. But it's split across 3 bodies, which isn't the best situation in the world. But then I realized the potential this card has with all of the other Grime Street cards. Being able to buff this card just 1 stat point triples the effect. So putting this card at a 3/3 gives you 9/9 worth of stats on 5 mana. And with all of the other cards, you could feasibly have this card be buffed up to a 4/4 or even a 5/5 by turn 5, which means you can get crazy tempo plays. On turn 5, you can simply have 3 5/5s out of nowhere, which is incredibly hard to deal with. This card can just immediately win you the game, hands down, if you manage to land a few buffs on it. By itself, 2/2, you're not really going to want to play this. You're most definitely going to want to play this with buffs. Being able to buff this card and get incredible value out of it is absolutely insane. In Arena, though, I don't see it being too well because you're not going to be able to reliably buff your cards like that. But in Constructed, this card will see a lot of play in buff decks, specifically the ones that are going to be buff from hand. This card is absolutely insane, crazy. Well, that's it for this review of some of the cards coming up in the next Hearthstone expansion, Mean Streets of Gadgetzan. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.